Narration: The Life and Ideas of Albert Einstein. Tonight, we begin with a name that echoes through the halls of science and history. Albert Einstein, perhaps the most iconic physicist of the modern era, a man whose wild hair and thoughtful eyes became symbols of genius itself. From reshaping our understanding of space and time to quietly resisting war and injustice, Einstein's life was woven with curiosity, quiet rebellion, and moments of profound reflection. So before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, only if you enjoy this kind of content. Also, let us know where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. Sometimes our stories are too interesting, and we're working hard to make some boring ones. Now, it's time to dim the lights, turn on a fan for background noise, and settle in as we explore tonight's story together. Albert Einstein was born on a quiet spring day, March 14, 1879, in the small German city of UML. He wasn't born into grandeur or fame, but into the soft rhythm of ordinary life. His father, Hermann, was an engineer. His mother, Pauline, a gifted pianist. Their home hummed with a gentle mix of tools and melodies, science and art, an atmosphere that would quietly shape the boy who would one day transform our understanding of the universe. From the beginning, Albert was different, though, not in the way people often expect geniuses to appear. He was slow to speak. Some in his family even feared he never would. He would often repeat full sentences quietly to himself, as if he needed to test the words before sending them into the world. But what he lacked in speech, he made up for in stillness, a quiet, intense curiosity that seemed to drink in everything around him. When he was about 5 years old, homesick in bed, his father gave him a small gift to cheer him up, a pocket compass, just a tiny object with a needle suspended behind glass. But for Albert, it was a revelation. He turned it, tilted it, stared at it for hours. No matter what he did, the needle moved, always pointing north. Something invisible was moving it. Something he couldn't see, touch, or hear, but something that existed. He was captivated. That compass didn't just point north, it pointed forward. It awakened what Einstein would later call his first wonder, the realization that the universe was ruled by laws and mysteries he could spend his life uncovering. That moment, a boy, a fever, and a dancing needle would become the quiet start of a journey that stretched across continents, reshaped science, and entered the minds of generations to come. Einstein's early school years, however, were anything but brilliant. In fact, if you'd been one of his teachers, you might never have imagined you were looking at a future symbol of genius. He wasn't disruptive, but he didn't exactly follow the rules either. He didn't sit straight with eager eyes. He didn't memorize answers. What he did, quietly, inwardly, was think. And in classrooms where conformity was king, that made him a misfit. In late 19th century Germany, the school system was strict, nearly militaristic. Lessons were rigid. Rote memorization was praised. Creativity, not welcomed, often punished. But Albert didn't want to memorize what others had already figured out. He wanted to understand. Why? Why did light behave the way it did? Why was the sky blue? Why did time feel slow when you were bored, and fast when you were happy? These weren't questions that earned gold stars. They earned raised eyebrows. His teachers often found him frustrating. One even told him he'd never amount to anything. Another asked him to leave school altogether. But at home, Einstein was a different kind of student. He devoured books on his own physics, mathematics, philosophy. At just 12 years old, he discovered Euclidean geometry and began teaching himself algebra and calculus, not for grades, not for praise, but simply for the joy of exploring the unknown. He also found solace in music. His mother introduced him to the violin when he was young. At first, he resisted, but as he grew older, music became a refuge. He especially loved Mozart. The violin gave him rhythm when the world felt chaotic. He once said that if he hadn't been a physicist, he might have been a musician. So while the classroom tried to box him in, Albert quietly built his own world, a world of questions, numbers, silence, and sound. He wasn't failing. He was simply waiting for a challenge worthy of his mind, and soon, that challenge would arrive. Europe rejected him again and again. At times it seemed as though no one wanted him. For over 2 years, Einstein drifted through what he would later call his wasted years, but they weren't truly wasted. They were the quiet before the storm, the waiting period before genius found its voice. Eventually, A friend helped him secure a job at the Swiss Patent Office in Bern. Not as a physicist, not even as a teacher, he was a clerk. His job was to review patent applications for electromagnetic devices and small mechanical inventions. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable, and more importantly, it was quiet. That silence gave him space. While others saw a dull government job, Einstein saw opportunity. The work was repetitive, which meant his mind was free. He scribbled ideas on scraps of paper and the backs of patent applications. He took long walks along the Aare River, puzzling over questions most people never even considered. And at night, in his modest apartment, he continued to dream. No lab, no team, just Albert, his thoughts, and the ticking of the clock. During this time, he also fell in love with Mileva Marek, a fellow physics student from Zurich. Their relationship was passionate but complex. They eventually married and had children, but their union was also marked by strain. Einstein was still searching for himself, still becoming the man he would one day be. And marriage, for all its comfort, added new pressures. Yet through it all, one thing remained constant: Talbot's obsession with light. He imagined riding on a beam of light, wondering what the world would look like from that impossible perspective. That single idea, born in obscurity and shaped during his lonely patent office years, would soon spark one of the greatest revolutions in human thought. The world didn't see him yet, but he was almost ready. The year was 1905. Albert Einstein was 26 years old, working full-time at the Swiss Patent Office in Bern. By day, he reviewed inventions. By night, he pursued the questions that haunted him. That year, quietly, without celebration, he rewrote the laws of physics. Historians call it his annus mirabilis, his miracle year. In just 12 months, Einstein published for scientific papers not minor contributions, but works that fundamentally changed how we understand reality. The first paper explained the photoelectric effect. It showed that light wasn't just a wave, it could behave like a particle. This was the beginning of quantum theory, a strange and radical idea that would one day even unsettle Einstein himself. His insights paved the way for technologies like solar panels, lasers, and the foundations of modern computing. The second paper confirmed the existence of atoms. At the time, atoms were still theoretical to many scientists, but Einstein, using statistical calculations, showed how their motion explained the behavior of particles in liquid. Suddenly, the invisible world of atoms had a doorway, and Einstein had opened it. The third paper introduced special relativity. In it, Einstein proposed something astonishing. Space and time were not fixed. They could stretch, bend, and shift depending on how fast you moved. Imagine two people, one standing still, the other speeding through space. Their clocks would tick at different rates. The faster you moved, the slower time became. And then came the fourth paper, just a few pages long, but a quiet bombshell. It introduced a formula: E equals mc, energy equals mass, times the speed of light, squared. This equation revealed that mass and energy are interchangeable. A single drop of matter held unimaginable energy, a principle that would later power stars, nuclear reactors, and even weapons. And all this came from a man with no university position, no laboratory, and no assistant. Just a desk, a pen, and a relentless imagination. The scientific world barely understood what had hit it. But in that quiet office, a revolution had begun. By 1919, the world finally caught up to Einstein, not because of a new discovery, but because his earlier work had been confirmed. That year, British astronomer Sir Arthur Eddington led an expedition to observe a solar eclipse. During the eclipse, starlight passing near the sun appeared to shift slightly, confirming Einstein's prediction that gravity could bend light. Newspapers seized the story. One headline read, "Lights all askew in the heavens." Overnight, Einstein became a global celebrity, not just in Germany, not just among scientists, but everywhere. He became the first scientific superstar. Reporters followed him. Crowds gathered. His face appeared in newspapers and magazines, often beside the mysterious formula, E equals mc, even if few truly understood what it meant. But fame was never Einstein's goal. He found it strange, even exhausting. Strangers stopped him in the streets. Letters flooded in by the hundreds, questions, compliments, theories, pleas. He once said that being famous made him feel like an exotic animal in a zoo. Behind the fame, Einstein remained himself, a thinker, an introvert, a wanderer of ideas. While others gathered to hear him speak, he preferred solitary walks or playing violin in a quiet room. He loved sailing, though he wasn't good at it. The water, like the universe, gave him space to drift. In private, he continued working. He was still searching for the deepest truths, still asking questions no one else dared to ask. But fame brought distraction, ceremonies, honors, obligations. The world wanted more than science. They wanted a symbol. Einstein obliged up to a point, but deep down, he missed the obscurity of Bern, the stillness of the patent office, the purity of thought untouched by spotlight. And yet, even as the world grew louder, his mind never stopped asking, why? As the early 20th century tilted to chaos, Einstein stood apart not just as a scientist, but as a moral voice. The horrors of World War I disturbed him deeply. The glorification of violence, the blind loyalty to nations, the rows of young men sent to die. While many German intellectuals supported the war, Einstein refused. He co-authored a counter-manifesto. It was ignored, but it didn't matter. He believed that silence in the face of violence was betrayal. From then on, he spoke more openly for peace, for understanding, for global cooperation. After the war, Einstein's beliefs evolved further. He became increasingly political, not because he sought power, but because he couldn't bear to watch humanity destroy itself. He saw nationalism as poison, racism, inequality, and militarism deeply troubled him. He spoke out for pacifism, for Zionism, for civil rights. Then came Hitler. As anti-Semitism spread like wildfire through Germany, Einstein knew he had to leave. In 1933, he renounced his German citizenship and accepted a position at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, New Jersey. There, in quiet exile, he would spend the rest of his life. But peace didn't follow him. The Nazi regime grew bolder, and the threat of a terrifying weapon, a bomb powered by the very equation Einstein had uncovered, began to loom. In 1939, Einstein signed a letter to President Franklin D. Roosevelt, warning that Germany might be developing a nuclear bomb. He urged the US to begin its own research. That letter helped initiate the Manhattan Project, the race to build the atomic bomb. Einstein didn't work on the bomb itself, but he carried the guilt of that letter for the rest of his life. He had spoken from fear, not ambition, and when he saw the destruction in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, his heart was heavy. He had unlocked the power of the universe, but he could not control how the world used it. By the time he settled into life in Princeton, Einstein had become more than a scientist. He was a symbol, a spirit, a free thought in a world unraveling. Yet in exile, he sought something simpler, quiet. He moved into a modest home on a tree-lined street, where he would remain for the rest of his life. Locals saw him walking alone, hands behind his back, hair wild in the wind. He didn't wear socks. He disliked fame. He welcomed visitors only when the visits were sincere. At the Institute, Einstein continued working on his great final ambition, the unified field theory, a single, elegant equation that could explain all forces of nature, gravity, electromagnetism, and more. It was a near-spiritual pursuit. He believed the universe had a deeper code, a harmony beneath the chaos. While others embraced quantum uncertainty, Einstein resisted. God does not play dice with the universe, he famously said, not because of religion but because he believed in order, in reason, in symmetry. Outside of science, he continued speaking up. He condemned racism in America, comparing it to the anti-Semitism he had fled. He supported civil rights leaders, denounced nuclear weapons, and refused to stay silent in the face of injustice. And yet, most days were spent in solitude, reading, scribbling, listening to music, watching seasons change from his study window. Some thought he was out of touch with modern physics, but Einstein didn't mind. He wasn't chasing prestige, he was chasing truth. In his final years, he rose early, walked often, and filled page after page with calculations. His handwriting remained steady. He tried again and again to find the theory that would unify it all. He turned down honors, declined political positions. In 1952, after the death of Israel's first president, Einstein was offered the presidency. He politely refused. "I deal with equations, not people," he said. He preferred clarity over control, quiet over power. To the neighbors in Princeton, he wasn't a genius. He was the gentle, strange old man who wandered the streets, sometimes humming, sometimes smiling. Albert Einstein died in 1955, but the questions he asked still echo through Every lab, every classroom, every curious mind. He didn't just rewrite physics. He reminded us that the universe is something to be wondered at, that mystery is worth chasing. And maybe, just maybe, the most extraordinary minds are the ones that never stop asking, why, he would smile, offer them sweets, or ruffle their hair. In return, they gave him what he valued most, freedom from questions. In private, Einstein's health had begun to fade. His heart was weakening, but he refused surgery. He believed life had a natural rhythm and he would not interrupt it. "It is tasteless to prolong life artificially," he once said. "I have done my share. It is time to go." On April 17, 1955, Albert Einstein collapsed from internal bleeding caused by an aortic aneurysm. He was taken to the hospital, where doctors offered surgery. He quietly refused. The next morning, April 18th, he passed away in his sleep. There was no grand farewell, no staged goodbye, just a stack of notes on his desk's scribbled equations. From the night before, he had been working on his unified theory until the very end, as if the universe might offer him one last glimpse of its secrets. His body was cremated in a private ceremony. His ashes were scattered in an undisclosed location. He had asked that no shrine be built, no grave become a monument. He had always belonged to the cosmos, and in the end, he returned to it. The man who revealed the fabric of space and time slipped quietly back into it. Albert Einstein is gone, but his presence never really left. His ideas still ripple through time, quiet and profound, like echoes in a vast cosmic canyon. His name has become more than a name. It is a symbol, whispered in classrooms, scribbled into textbooks, turned into jokes, questions, compliments, 7 cartoons. But beneath the pop culture shadow lies something more meaningful. A man who never stopped asking why. He changed how we see the world, not just scientifically, but philosophically. Before Einstein, time was a steady drumbeat, space, a static stage. After him, they became flexible, fluid, woven together into a fabric that could bend, twist, and ripple. He helped us understand that mass and energy were not different things, but different faces of the same truth. That reality could look different, depending on how fast you moved, or how closely you looked. Beyond the theories and formulas, Einstein taught us something quieter, something deeper, that it's okay not to have all the answers, that imagination has value, that the universe is not just made of particles and math but also of wonder. The most beautiful experience, he once wrote, is the mysterious. It is the source of all true art and science. He wasn't perfect. He made mistakes, wrestled with regrets, struggled in relationships, but in many ways, that made him more human, not less. He was not a cold genius in an ivory tower. He laughed, he loved, he doubted, he cared, he spoke for peace when others remained silent. He stood against injustice, even when it cost him, and he never let the weight of fame silence his curiosity. Today, we continue to build on what he began. Satellites navigate using his equations. Nuclear energy pulses with his discoveries. Black holes curve space as he predicted. And far above us, in the silence of deep space, the light from distant galaxies still bends just as he said it would. As you lie there tonight, listening to the quiet hum around you, know this: the universe is still expanding, still unfolding, still filled with questions. And somewhere in the whisper of stars and the curve of time, the spirit of Einstein lingers, smiling, always curious, always wondering what comes next. Sleep well, and keep asking why. Flickering dimly through curtains of dust, some families chose to hide. They shut windows, braced doors, and prayed the storm would pass. Others decided to flee, grabbing whatever valuables they could carry: coins, amulets, silverware, household gods. The air grew thicker by the minute. People pressed cloth to their mouths, but the ash found its way in. Breathing became a struggle for the elderly, the very young. It was nearly impossible. Some collapsed in the streets, coughing, unable to go on. A man helped his pregnant wife down an alley, one arm shielding her head, the other carrying a small bronze statue of Minerva. Nearby, a group of teenagers tried climbing the city walls, perhaps for a better view or a way out. They stopped laughing when a nearby roof caved in with a heavy, sudden crash. At the baths, steam mixed with volcanic dust. The air was thick and unbreathable. Water grew cloudy with ash. Those inside stumbled out wrapped in towels, unsure whether to run or return. Farther out in the fields, some who had fled early looked back toward Pompeii and wept. The city was cloaked in black. A massive column of smoke towered above it like a curse. Lightning cracked within the ash cloud, painting the sky in flashes of orange and blue. It was no longer a disaster, which was a burial in progress, and Vesuvius had only begun to exhale. By mid-afternoon, Pompeii was disappearing, stone by stone, breath by breath. The ashfall no longer drifted gently. It crashed in waves, driven by shifting winds and the mountain's furious breath. Over a meter of pumice now covered the streets. Doors could not open. Windows would not close. The weight of the sky had settled on the city, and it showed no sign of lifting. Roofs began to fail. The first collapse came at a villa near the House of the Faun. The roof gave way with a low, aching groan, then crashed inward with terrifying speed. Dust burst outward. The home's frescoes vanished beneath rubble. Statues fell. A slave girl trapped in the atrium had no time to scream. It was not the last dot all across Pompeii. Walls shuddered. Beams snapped. In a workshop, a merchant tried shielding his goods with a cloth before the upper floor caved in. In a bakery, an oven still glowed faintly, but the ceiling above it sagged dangerously. No one remained to feed the fire. The city grew darker. Ash clogged oil lamps and dimmed their flames. The air turned gritty and bitter. It coated mouths, nostrils, lungs. Breathing grew shallow, wheezing. People now moved, not to escape, but to find air, just a pocket, just a breath. The silence was broken only by the crashing of buildings, the coughing of the trapped, and the rumble of Vesuvius far above. The world had shrunk to shadows and ash. Some residents retreated underground into storerooms, wine cellars. There they huddled in pitch darkness, hoping the stone above them would hold. Mothers wrapped their arms around children. Some clutched keys, hoping to return to homes that were already gone. Others held nothing at all, just the hands of those they loved. Outside, time slowed. The ash now reached knee-deep. Streets were silent. Fountains had stopped flowing. The statues of the gods were buried up to their shoulders, their marble faces streaked with soot. Pompei. I was still alive, but barely. Its heart beat slower now, and above it all, Mount Vesuvius continued to rumble, preparing something worse than ash. The ash had fallen for hours. Pompeii was half buried, suffocating, silent. Then the mountain changed. At 5:30 p.m., Mount Vesuvius gave a low guttural roar different from before. It wasn't an explosion, it was a release. Something deep inside it cracked. Moments later, the first pyroclastic surge broke loose. It wasn't lava, it was worse, a dense cloud of superheated gas, ash, and pulverized rock. It rushed down the slope over 700 degrees Celsius, faster than wind. A grey avalanche that flowed like water and burned like fire. It hit the neighboring town of Herculaneum, first swallowing it whole in under 5 minutes. People were flash-heated to death where they stood. Bodies didn't fall, they were frozen upright, carbonized instantly. Skulls fractured from expanding steam. The surge was so fast, no one had time to run. Pompeii was still, but it could feel the change. The air, already thick with ash, grew hotter. Sulfur hung heavy in every breath. A second tremor shook the city. Columns tilted. A bronze statue toppled with a metallic crash. Those still alive could now see the glowing red rim around the mountain. They heard the sound of boiling earth like thunder rolling beneath their feet. A few tried to run again, but it was too late. Roads were gone. Homes were sealed. Escape was impossible. A boy clutched his father's tunic. They stood in a stairwell beneath a collapsed roof. He asked if the gods were angry. The man did not answer. He didn't know. By 6:30 p.m., thick black clouds blotted out even the faintest daylight. Ash now reached the shoulders of statues, the tops of market stalls. Fires burned in buildings, their flames dimmed by smoke. And then silence. Brief, complete, terrifying. The first pyroclastic surge had not yet reached Pompeii, but it was close. The mountain had changed the rules. What began as ash and fear was now something else. Something final. Above the rooftops, the sky glowed red, pulsed with lightning. The mountain was no longer a distant danger, it was a living god, and it was coming. Pompeii had hours left maybe, but the mercy of time was fading. Darkness had swallowed Pompeii completely. There was no moon, no stars, no flame could pierce the weight of ash in the air. Only the soft red flicker from distant fires reflected off the ash-covered walls. The city no longer breathed. It waited. Between 7 and 10 p.m., the silence became unbearable. Those still alive spoke in whispers. Voices were hoarse from dust. Eyes burned. Chests ached. Most had stopped trying to flee. There was nowhere to go. Gates were blocked. The sea was choked with debris. Streets were filled with hot, shifting ash that rose to the waist. In a once elegant villa near the Street of Abundance, a young woman lit a single oil lamp. She knelt beside her father, who could no longer stand. He pressed a pendant into her hand, his final gift. In the garden beside them, statues of Venus and Apollo leaned sideways, half-buried. Elsewhere, a mother huddled beneath stairs with her son. She hummed a lullaby, trying to calm him, though her voice shook. The boy was quiet, not because he wasn't afraid, but because he was. Fear had become normal. Breathing was the only thing left, and even that was fading. In the stables, a dog lay twisted in its chain, claw marks deep in the ground. It had tried to free itself, but the ash came too quickly. By 8:45 p.m., tremors returned, heavier, deeper. The ground groaned under the pressure building within the volcano. Walls buckled. Another roof caved near the temple. Dust sprayed upward. A pillar collapsed into a courtyard, shattering with final echo. People now crouched in silence. There were no more plans, no more directions, only moments, one breath. Another. Pompeii's final witnesses were still. Some knelt in prayer. Others lay flat, arms shielding their faces. A few held hands, lips moving softly in darkness. No more screams. Just breath and stone. At 9:50 p.m., the glow above the mountain changed brighter, redder. The second pyroclastic surge began to form. Faster, heavier, deadlier. The final moments had come, and Pompeii, bruised and blind, did not cry out. It simply braced. At 10:15 p.m., the mountain broke. The second pyroclastic surge exploded from the flanks of Vesuvius without warning. It wasn't a wave, it was a wall. A roaring mass of gas, ash, molten rock, and invisible death. It surged down the slopes at over 100 mph. It didn't burn, it vaporized. It didn't knock, it crushed. This time, it reached Pompeii in a single, terrifying moment. The entire city was engulfed. The surge raced through gates, alleys, gardens, temples, smashing everything in its path. The temperature soared beyond 400 degrees Celsius, would ignite it instantly. Bodies were burned. No time to run, no time to think, only stillness. People were frozen where they fell. A man reaching for his wife, a mother shielding her child, a priest with his hand still raised in prayer. The heat robbed breath before lungs could exhale. Muscles locked. Ash hardened around forms, leaving voids in the shape of final gestures. Structures collapsed all at once. Ceilings fell. Walls crumbled. The forum was buried in debris. Even marble statues began to crack and blister. Fountains dried mid-flush, filling their basins like the last offering. The surge took less than a minute to erase the city. Then silence. A silence that did not feel like peace. It was too deep, too absolute. It was the sound of finality, of something vast and ancient, flickering dimly through curtains of dust. Some families chose to hide. They shut their windows, braced the doors, and prayed the storm would pass. Others fled, grabbing whatever valuables they could carry: coins, amulets, silverware, household gods. The air thickened by the minute. People pressed cloth to their mouths, but the ash always found its way in. Breathing became a struggle, especially for the elderly and the very young. For many, it was nearly impossible. Some collapsed in the streets, coughing, unable to continue. A man helped his pregnant wife down a narrow alley, one arm shielding her head, the other clutching a small bronze statue of Minerva. Nearby, a group of teenagers tried to climb the city walls, perhaps hoping for a better view or a way out. Their laughter stopped abruptly when a nearby roof caved in with a sudden, heavy crash. At the baths, steam mixed with volcanic dust. The air became thick, unbreathable. Water turned cloudy with ash. Those inside stumbled out, wrapped in towels, uncertain whether to run or return. Farther out in the fields, those who had fled early turned back to look and wept. Pompeii was cloaked in black. A massive column of smoke towered above it like a curse. Lightning cracked within the ash cloud, painting the sky with flashes of orange and blue. It was no longer a disaster. It was a burial in progress. And Vesuvius had only just begun to exhale. By mid-afternoon, Pompeii was vanishing stone by stone, breath by breath. The ash no longer drifted gently. It crashed down in waves, driven by furious winds and the mountain's wrath. More than a meter of pumice now blanketed the streets. Doors jammed shut, windows stuck. The weight of the sky had fallen on the city and it showed no sign of lifting. Roofs began to fail. The first collapse struck a villa near the house of the Faun. It groaned loath, then fell in with terrifying speed. Dust burst outward. Frescoes vanished under rubble. Statues fell. A slave girl, trapped in the atrium, had no time to scream. She was not the last. Across Pompeii, walls shuddered. Beams snapped. In a workshop, a merchant tried shielding his wares with cloth moments before the upper floor caved in. In a bakery, an oven still glowed faintly, but the ceiling above sagged dangerously. No one remained to stoke the fire. The city darkened further. Ash clogged the oil lamps, dimming their flames. The air turned bitter and gritty, coating mouths, nostrils, lungs. Breathing grew shallow, wheezing. People no longer ran to escape. They searched only for air, a pocket, a breath. Silence ruled, broken only by the crash of buildings, the coughs of the trapped, and the distant, constant rumble of Vesuvius. The world had shrunk to shadows and ash. Some residents retreated underground into storerooms and wine cellars. There, they huddled in total darkness, hoping the stone above would hold. Mothers wrapped arms around children. Some clutched house keys, dreaming of returning to homes already gone. Others held nothing, just the hands of those they loved. Outside, time slowed. Ash reached the knees. Streets fell silent. Fountains had stopped flowing. Statues of the gods were buried up to their shoulders, their marble faces streaked with soot. Pompeii still lived, but barely. Its heartbeat slowed, and above it, Vesuvius rumbled on, preparing something worse than ash. The ash had fallen for hours. Pompeii was half buried, choking, quiet. Then the mountain changed. At 5:30 p.m., Vesuvius released a new sound, a low, guttural roar. Not an explosion, a release. Something deep inside had cracked. Moments later, the first pyroclastic surge broke free. It wasn't lava, it was worse. A dense cloud of superheated gas, ash, and pulverized stone surged down the slope over 700 degrees Celsius, faster than wind. A grey avalanche that flowed like water and burned like fire. It struck Herculaneum first, swallowing the town in under 5 minutes. People died where they stood, flash-heated into death. Bodies didn't fall. They froze upright, carbonized instantly. Skulls fractured from steam expanding within. No one had time to run. Pompeii was still, but it felt the change. The air grew hotter. Sulfur choked every breath. A second tremor rocked the city. Columns tilted. A bronze statue fell with a crash. Survivors looked up and saw the glowing red rim around the volcano. They heard boiling earth like thunder from beneath the ground. Some tried to flee again, but it was too late. The roads were gone. The homes sealed. Escape was impossible. A boy clutched his father's tunic as they stood in a stairwell beneath a collapsed roof. "Are the gods angry?" he asked. The man didn't answer. He didn't know. By 6:30 p.m., thick clouds had erased the daylight. Ash reached the shoulders of statues, the tops of stalls. Fires burned in buildings, flickering weakly through smoke. Then silence. Brief. Total. Terrifying. The first surge had not yet reached Pompeii, but it was close. The mountain had changed the rules. What began as fear and ash had become something final. Above the rooftops, the sky pulsed red with lightning. Vesuvius was no longer a distant threat. It was a god, awakened, and it was coming. Pompeii had hours left maybe, but time offered no mercy now. Darkness swallowed the city whole. Moon, no stars, no flame could pierce the thickness of the air. Only the dull red glow of distant fire reflected faintly off ash-covered walls. The city no longer breathed. It waited. Between 7 and 10 p.m., silence became unbearable. Those still alive spoke only in whispers. Voices rasped, eyes burned, chests ached. Most had stopped fleeing. There was nowhere to go. The gates were blocked. The sea, choked with wreckage. The streets, filled waist-deep with burning ash. In a once elegant villa near the Street of Abundance, a young woman lit an oil lamp. She knelt beside her father, who could no longer stand. He pressed a pendant into her hand, his final gift. In the garden, statues of Venus and Apollo leaned half-buried. Elsewhere, a mother hummed a lullaby beneath the stairs. Her son was quiet, not because he wasn't afraid, but because fear had become normal. Breathing was all that remained. Even that was fading. In the stables, a dog lay twisted in its chain. Deep claw marks scarred the stone. It had tried to escape, but the ash came too fast. By 8:45 p.m., tremors returned, heavier, deeper. The ground groaned under growing pressure. Walls cracked. Another roof collapsed, near the temple. Dust burst upward. A pillar shattered. Now, no one moved with purpose. Only survival. Only moments. One breath. Another. Pompeii's final witnesses remained still. Some prayed. Some lay curled, arms over faces. Some held hands, lips moving faintly in the dark. No more. Screams. Just breath. And stone. At 9:50 p.m., the glow above the mountain brightened deep red. The second pyroclastic surge began. Faster, heavier, deadlier. The end had come. Pompeii, bruised, blind, did not cry out. It braced. At 10:15 p.m., the mountain broke. The second surge exploded from the flanks of Vesuvius. No warning. Not a wave, but a wall. A roaring tide of gas, ash, molten stone, and silent death tore down the slope over 100 mph. It didn't burn, it vaporized. It didn't knock, it crushed. In seconds, Pompeii was engulfed. The surge raced through every gate, alley, garden, and temple, obliterating all. Temperatures soared past 400 degrees Celsius. Wood ignited, bodies, flash dash, burned. No time to run, no time to scream, only stillness. People froze where they fell, a man reaching for his wife, a mother shielding her child, a priest with his hand still raised in prayer. Heat stole breath before lungs could exhale. Ash encased their final gestures. Structures fell, ceilings collapsed, walls crumbled. The forum disappeared beneath stone. Even marble blistered. Fountains dried mid-flush, filling their basins like a final offering. The surge took less than a minute to erase the city. Then silence, not peace, not rest, a silence too deep, to final. It was the sound of something vast and ancient, completing its terrible task. The mountain groans once more, then falls silent. Pompeii is gone. No smoke rises from chimneys. Voices echo in the streets. No footsteps cross the stones of the forum. The ash lies thick and still, a city perfectly preserved beneath 10 feet of volcanic dust. Caught, not in ruin, but in pause. The winds shift gently across the plain, carrying the last of the sulfur east. The stars return to the sky, but there is no one left to see them. All that remains is shape, position, posture, the frozen choreography of people who had no time to say goodbye. And above them, Mount Vesuvius looms, quiet now, emptied of fury, crowned in steam. But deep beneath that stillness, Pompeii sleeps, waiting. Midnight passes. The eruption slows. What was once a roar becomes a murmur, distant, almost tired. Vesuvius exhales smoke into the black sky, but its fire is gone. Pompeii lies beneath it now, still, silent. There are no more screams, no footsteps, no prayers, no winds to carry them. Only ash, heavy and unmoving. Beneath this blanket, the city sleeps. Temples remain standing, half covered, their gods silenced by stone. Amphorae lie untouched in kitchens, loaves of bread fossilized in ovens. Tables are still set. Coins rest in drawers beside forgotten dreams. Time has stopped, but everything remains exactly where it was, frozen in its final heartbeat. No one comes to search, not for days, not for years. Eventually, not for centuries, nature reclaims the region. Slowly, vines creep over broken columns. The earth cools. New trees take root in the ash. Grass grows where Pompeian voices once echoed. The name Pompeii fades from maps, from memory, from history. Other cities rise. Empires fall. The mountain sleeps again. And then 700 years later, the silence breaks. In 1748, during routine excavation, workmen strike something unexpected. Painted walls, bright, delicate, preserved. They dig deeper. Rooms appear, skeletons, mosaics, streets. Pompeii begins to awaken. Historians, artists, and archaeologists come to the buried city like pilgrims. They brush ash from they cast the voids left by boulders, filling them with plaster, to reveal forms frozen at the moment of death. A man curled on a stair, a girl clutching her necklace, a dog straining at its chain. We do not see ruins. We see life interrupted. Pompeii becomes more than a tragedy. It becomes a mirror time capsule, a reminder that joy, fear, beauty, and loss can coexist in a single breath, that a city can vanish in one night and still whisper across 2 millennia. Today, we walk the same streets. We stand in doorways where others once lived and loved. We stare into plaster faces shaped by fire and silent sand. We imagine their voices. They are gone, but they are not forgotten, because sometimes the past is not lost. It is simply waiting, and in the quiet grey of volcanic ash, Pompeii still remembers. Purpose and power. These were the brushes and chisels of Harlem's artists. They painted what had never been seen before. Black life, black beauty, black history through black eyes. Not as caricatures or curiosities, but as creators, as storytellers. Aaron Douglas led the way. A quiet man with a bold vision, Douglas fused African motifs with modernist design, geometric forms, silhouetted figures, radiant lines pulsing with energy. His murals didn't just decorate walls, they told epics from the sorrow of slavery to the pride of resistance. In aspects of Negro life, he captured it all. Dancers in motion, men in chains, hands reaching toward light. His faceless figures were not nameless, they were everyone. Ancestors, hope. Palmer Hayden painted the working class, barbers, fishermen, ordinary people in ordinary moments. Archibald Motley captured the rhythm of black nightlife, jazz clubs bursting with color, movement, light bouncing off polished shoes and smiling faces. In darkrooms across Harlem, photographers like James Van Der Zee revealed a different kind of beauty, real beauty. His portraits showed black families in their finest, newlyweds holding hands, soldiers in uniform, children standing tall beside parents. Van Der Zee gave Harlem a mirror, one that reflected dignity, joy, pride, and sorrow. He found the sacred in the everyday and framed it with reverence. Visual art during the Harlem Renaissance was never just about aesthetics, was a declaration, a correction, a truth. Artists reclaimed their image from centuries of distortion. No longer mammies and minstrels, no longer faceless laborers. They were kings and queens, mothers and scholars, dancers and saints. Every brushstroke was protest, every photograph a sentence in a story long denied. And art wasn't confined to galleries. It was in church walls, shop windows, community centers, magazine pages. Harlem's canvas was wide and artists filled it with truth, while jazz filled the air and poetry lit the page. Something deeper stirred beneath Harlem's Renaissance, an awakening of political purpose. For centuries, black people had been told to shrink, to be invisible. But in Harlem, pride became public, and with it came power. W.E.B. Du Bois believed in the talented tenth, the most educated, refined black Americans leading the way. Forward to him, Harlem's Renaissance was proof of black excellence, not someday, but now. He urged artists to use their gifts for justice, not just beauty, to elevate the race and confront white supremacy. Not everyone agreed. Langston Hughes, younger and bold, pushed back. He wanted to right the poor, the struggling, the angry, the joyful. "We know we are beautiful," he said, "and ugly too." Pride meant showing everything, the full, glorious, messy humanity of black life. Then came Marcus Garvey. While Du Bois urged integration, Garvey preached independence. His Universal Negro Improvement Association championed self-reliance, economic strength, and African roots. His parades filled streets. His red, black, and green flag became a symbol of global black identity. Garvey dreamed of ships, of black-owned industries, of liberation from a system that refused to see them. These voices, Du Bois, Hughes, Garvey, didn't always agree, but together they formed a chorus, a brilliant, unignorable Harlem chorus, because the Renaissance wasn't just art, it was politics. It didn't ask for a seat at the table. It built its own, and beneath every note, every brushstroke, every word whispered by candlelight pulsed a steady drumbeat. We exist. We matter. We are. On Harlem's stage, a new kind of woman stood, brilliant, bold, unafraid. Not just muses, but architects of the Renaissance. Scholars, singers, sculptors, storytellers. Zora Neale Hurston was one of the brightest, a folklorist and novelist from rural Florida. She brought black dialect and rhythm into literature with fearless clarity. In Their Eyes Were Watching God, she gave us a heroine who found her voice, not through love, but through loss, through land, through herself. At Barnard College, the only black student, Zora studied anthropology. She traveled the South, recording songs and stories never before written. She honored black culture as legacy, not curiosity. In Paris, Josephine Baker danced barefoot and fierce, mocking stereotypes, dazzling audiences. Offstage, she became a World War II spy. In the States, Ma Rainey and Bessie Smith turned blues into thunder. Raw, powerful, undeniable, they sang not for approval, but release. Women of the Renaissance. Also organized, they led clubs, hosted salons, published essays. They fought for women's rights and against racism in feminist movements. They carved their own path in art, in activism. They redefined what it meant to be black and female, unbound, unfiltered, unashamed. In every line, every lyric, every brushstroke, they declared, "I will not be silenced. I am the story too." As the sun dipped below Manhattan and street lamps lit Harlem's corners, the city changed. Daytime was for workers, families, thinkers. Night was for rhythm. Music didn't sleep, it burned hotter. At the Cotton Club, white patrons in tuxedos watched black brilliance explode on stage. Duke Ellington ruled the room. Voices rose over, brass dancers flew. The irony, stung black performers dazzled for an audience they couldn't join. But on stage, they owned it. At the Savoy Ballroom, no velvet rope, no segregation. Black and white danced side by side. Lindy Hoppers spun, skirts twirled. The floor trembled with joy. Beyond the club speakeasies, jazz dens, apartment parties, art bloomed in real time. Langston Hughes scribbled on napkins. Musicians traded verses. Painters sketched by candlelight. Every night held the promise of something born. But beneath the glamour, there was grit. Performers paid pennies. Dancers cleaning rooms by day. Yet something electric lived in those hours. A pulse, a truth. We are brilliant. We shine especially in darkness. In Harlem, even fashion was protest. Men wore zoot suits bold, loud, space-taking, shoes polished to mirrors, hats angled just so. Women rocked bright lipstick, beaded dresses, sculpted curls, head wraps, natural hair. Every choice was declaration. Style wasn't vanity, was power. It said, "See me. I belong here." Language transformed to slang, dialect, code switching, all became tools of resistance. They reimagined English with soul. Even silence on eyebrow raised, a hand on hippie was defiance. In salons and barbershops, swagger passed hand to hand. One bright scarf sparked dozens more. Harlem style rippled into Chicago, Detroit, London, Paris. It whispered into future revolutions. To dress beautifully in a world that denied your worth was protest. To strut was politics. To show joy was resistance. And Harlem dazzled by the 1930s. The Renaissance dimmed. The Great Depression took hold. Clubs closed. Artists scattered. But the flame lived on in memory, in music, in words passed hand to hand. Harlem's seeds rooted deep. Writers became mentors. Musicians became legends. Painters became mirrors. You can hear the Renaissance in Maya Angelou's voice, in Nikki Giovanni's cadence. Claude McKay echoes in Malcolm X, in the rhythms of Gil Scott-Heron, in Motown, in hip-hop. Harlem still pulses with that spark. The Apollo stands tall. Murals, bookstores, gardens keep the fire. The Harlem Renaissance proved black life in America is not tragedy, it is triumph. It is joy. It is history shaped by culture. And that culture the voice long denied is the story, as the music softens. Remember, the Harlem Renaissance wasn't a moment. It was a declaration, one that still echoes.